All right, quick hello. This is an original Tales First story and I won't over-explain. Let's start.
"We'll pay you nothing," my mom said to my 14-year-old. "You really thought you'd get money? How pathetic!" My sister laughed in her face. After making her work at their restaurant for weeks, promising a salary, I didn't shout. I did this. The next morning, they called me in a panic. When I opened the front door, I expected noise. Not loud party noise. Not teenagers have taken over the living room noise. Just the regular soundtrack of a 14-year-old existing, a half-playing video, a snack bag crinkling, the faint tapping of thumbs on a phone. Instead, I got silence. The kind that doesn't feel peaceful. The kind that makes you stop with your keys still in your hand because your body notices something before your brain can politely catch up. Molly was sitting on the couch, facing the wall like the wall had something important to say. She wasn't scrolling. She wasn't watching anything. She wasn't even pretending to do homework. And her phone, her actual limb at this point, was nowhere in sight. Her shoulders were pulled tight, like she'd been trying to hold herself together using pure willpower. Her eyes looked swollen. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just used. I set my bag down slowly, like sudden movements might scare the truth back into hiding. "Hey," I said, as gently as I could. "Honey, what's going on?" Molly blinked like she'd forgotten she had to function in a world with people. Then she did what kids do when they're trying to protect you from a problem they don't know how to explain. "Nothing." It was too quick, too flat, like someone had handed her the line and she was repeating it because she didn't have anything else. I didn't push. Not yet. I sat beside her, close enough to be there, not so close it felt like a trap. "Okay," I said. "I'm right here. Take your time." She tried to keep it together. Her jaw tightened, her breath went thin, her eyes shone again. Then it broke through anyway. Her face crumpled, and the words spilled out like they'd been trapped inside her. "They said, they're not gonna pay me." The sentence hit me wrong. Not because I didn't understand the words, because my brain refused to believe they could be arranged like that and still be real. "Not pay you?" I repeated, carefully, like the phrase might change if I said it slower. "What do you mean, not pay you?" Molly swallowed, eyes fixed on her hands. "Grandma," she said, voice breaking. "And Aunt Brielle." My stomach dropped. Not in the "I didn't know you were working there" way. I knew. Of course I knew. It had been part of the first month of summer break. The schedule, the shifts, the proud little "I've got this mom" energy Molly had been carrying around. But "they're not gonna pay me" didn't fit into reality. Not the reality I lived in. Not with family. Not with a kid. "They're just late," I said automatically. "Right? They said later?" Molly's head shook, small and hopeless. She took a breath like she'd been rehearsing this part, like she'd been trying to find a version that would hurt less. "No, I asked last week and they said, later. And then I asked again and they said, later. And then today I asked again." "Today was payday," I said, more to myself than to her. "End of the month." Molly nodded. "I went to them after my shift," she continued. "I just asked that if they had time. Like, if they could pay me." She said it in the tone of someone who had tried very hard to do it the right way. Polite. Calm. Not demanding. Just normal. "And then?" Molly's mouth tightened. Her eyes filled again. "Grandma laughed," she said. I felt something inside my chest go cold. "She laughed," Molly repeated, like she still couldn't believe it either. "And she said, 'We'll pay you nothing.'" My throat tightened so fast it was like my body was trying to stop me from speaking, like it knew what was coming. "And Brielle was there," Molly added. "And she said, 'You really thought we'd pay you? How pathetic. The words landed like slaps, not just because they were cruel, but because they were casual, like it was fun, like Molly's hope had been a joke they were waiting to tell. Molly stared at her hands again. "They said I was family," she whispered, "that I was just helping." "But you worked there full-time for a month." "Yes, I know, but she said that family doesn't get paid for helping." Her voice wobbled. The humiliation was eating her alive. "And then," she said, quieter, "they said my work wasn't even good." That part was the worst. Not the money, not even the stealing, the dismantling, the way they took something she'd been proud of and made it feel embarrassing. I could feel my pulse in my ears. I could feel my hands wanting to do something, slam a table, throw a plate, call someone, and let all the anger out. But I didn't want Molly to see me explode. She'd already been laughed at. She didn't need chaos on top of it. So I forced my voice to stay steady. "Did they say anything else?" Molly hesitated, like she didn't want to repeat it, like saying it would make it true all over again. "They said we didn't have a written contract," she said. "Like, that meant I was stupid for thinking they'd pay me." My mouth went dry. There are moments when you learn something about the people who raised you that you wish you could unlearn, like finding out a childhood photo is fake, like realizing a familiar voice is capable of saying things you thought only strangers could say. I picked up my phone. "Okay," I said, voice still calm. "I'm going to call Grandma." Molly's eyes snapped up. Fear flashed there. "Mom, I'm not yelling," I promised, even though my whole body wanted to become a siren. "I just need to hear it from her." I hit call. It rang twice. Mom answered like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just taken a child's labor and turned it into a punchline. "Hello?" "Mom," I said carefully. "Molly says you told her you won't pay her." A pause. A tiny, almost amused one. "Oh," Mom said. "She told you." My stomach turned. "So it's true," I said. "Yes," Mom replied, like she was discussing the weather. "We're not paying her." I stared at the wall across from me, the same wall Molly had been staring at when I came in, and I understood why she'd looked like she'd been hollowed out. "But you promised her," I said, voice tightening. "You told her she'd be paid." Mom made a sound, something between a scoff and a laugh. "That was obviously a joke," she said. "She's family. She was helping." "She was working," I said. "Full shifts. For weeks." "And?" Mom replied. "She got experience. She should be grateful." I felt Molly shift beside me, like the words were physically pushing her down. "And honestly," Mom added, with the casual cruelty of someone who has never been told no in her life, "her work wasn't even good. If we were paying for that, we wouldn't have hired her." I didn't speak for a second, not because I had nothing to say, but because the anger had reached a level where words felt too small. Then Mom delivered the final little knife like she was proud of it. "We didn't have a contract," she said. "So what exactly do you think you can do?" Molly made a sound that wasn't quite a sob and wasn't quite a breath. That sound did something to me. It didn't make me louder. It made me still. I ended the call. I turned to Molly. Her face was blotchy. Her eyes were wide. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the couch cushions and never come out. I pulled her into me. She shook. She cried. Not dramatic crying, the kind where you try to stop and you can't because your body is leaking the shock out of you. I held her tight. "I'm so sorry," I whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry they did that to you." Molly sniffed. I thought I did something wrong." "No," I said, firm. "You did your job. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. They did something wrong." She hiccuped again. "They laughed at me," she whispered. "I know," I said. I know. And you didn't deserve that. Not for 1 second. I didn't shout. I didn't call them back. I didn't pace the room like a storm. I kept my voice steady because Molly needed steady. But inside me, something had clicked into place. Soon, I would do something that made them regret everything. And the next morning, my mom would call me in a panic. People like to imagine situations like this come out of nowhere. Like a normal family just suddenly wakes up one day and decides, as a fun activity, to steal from a child. But when I looked back, really looked back, it didn't feel random. It felt like the final scene in a story that had been playing since I was small. I was 3 years younger than my sister Brielle, which might not sound like much. But in my house, it meant everything. Brielle was the sun, and me? I was furniture. Decorative, useful, quiet. When we were kids, Brielle would pick an interest, and the entire household would rearrange itself around it like it was a royal decree. Dance lessons, a new sport, some club she joined because it sounded impressive, a hobby she suddenly decided was her passion. Mom and Dad would throw themselves into it with the energy of people launching a rocket. They'd drive her to practice, pay for private lessons, buy the special equipment, sit in the front row, clap like she'd just cured something. And me? I clapped too. That was my role. I was the supporting cast, the one who smiled, the one who did chores because Brielle was too busy. She has practice, Mom would say, as if practice was a medical condition. Just help out. Your sister has so much on her plate, Dad would add, as if the plate was full of diamonds. So I helped out. I washed dishes, folded laundry, took care of the little things so Brielle could keep being important. And here's the part that messes with you. They weren't always cruel about it. They didn't have to be. They just treated Brielle like her life mattered more, like her dreams were family dreams, like her wants were the household's oxygen. By the time we were adults, the dynamic didn't disappear. It matured. Like a fine wine, if the wine is favoritism and it tastes like resentment. Brielle married, had 2 kids, Mason and Harper, around the same age Molly is now. And I watched something weird happen. The favoritism became a family heirloom. Mom and Dad would talk about Mason and Harper like they were tiny celebrities. They worried about their future. They set money aside. They spoke about them with this soft, glowing pride. Meanwhile, when Molly came up, the conversation shifted. Not mean, exactly. More like instructional. Molly needs to learn work ethic, Mom would say, as if my child had been born lazy and needed a lecture to survive. It's good for her to work hard, Dad would say, like joy was suspicious and should be kept under control. Love was not poured on Molly the way it was poured on Brielle's kids. Love was rationed, approval was conditional, lectures were free. Then, a few years ago, Brielle decided her dream was to own a restaurant. Not, I've always wanted this. Not, I've worked toward this. More like, one day she woke up and announced it like she was revealing her destiny, and Mom and Dad acted like this had always been the plan. This is Brielle's dream, Mom said, misty-eyed. She's always wanted this, Dad agreed, even though I was fairly certain Brielle's biggest dream 2 years earlier had been not having to wait in line for brunch. But once they decided it was her dream, it became sacred. Mom and Dad threw themselves into that restaurant the way they threw themselves into every Brielle project, except this time there was money involved. I didn't know the details. I just knew they were always there, always helping, always talking like they were part of it. Like it wasn't Brielle's restaurant. It was the family's crown. And then came the pressure. Over the last year, it got worse. They started pushing me to support the dream, which in my family is code for give Brielle something. Money, time, labor, silence. Mom would bring it up like she was discussing something obvious. You should invest, she'd say. Dad would add, calm and disappointed, it's family. I told them no. Not because I didn't love my family, not because I wanted them to fail, but because I have a daughter, and I have bills, and I have a college fund that matters more to me than Brielle's newest identity. Also, and this is important, I didn't want to be exploited. They didn't like that. The temperature dropped. The conversations got sharper. Every refusal became evidence of my selfishness. They also wanted free labor. "Just come help on weekends," Mom would say, breezy. "It's a startup." I went once. One time. And I remember standing there, watching the chaos, watching the way Mom and Brielle spoke to people like they were disposable, and thinking, I am not becoming part of this machine. So I stopped going. And then, one day, Molly came home glowing. "I got a job," she announced. "What kind of job?" I asked. "At the restaurant," she said, excited. "Aunt Brielle and Grandma offered. They said they'll pay me $14 an hour." $14 an hour. To a 14-year-old. It sounded respectable. Like the kind of thing adults say when they're treating a teenager's labor seriously. Molly was proud. She wanted to earn money for something meaningful. She'd been talking about saving up for a trip tied to her 15th birthday. Not alone, not reckless, just something she cared about, something that made her feel grown. And I wanted to support that. I did have a bad feeling. I knew my family, but I still couldn't imagine that they would do to Molly what they'd done to me my whole life in smaller ways. I couldn't imagine they would cross that line. And then we snapped back into the present, where Molly sat staring at the wall, and that line wasn't just crossed. It had been stomped on. That night, after Molly finally went to bed, the house went quiet in the way houses do when they're holding grief. The lights were off. The dishes were done. Everything looked normal. Except nothing was normal. I sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing, replaying Mom's voice in my head. "We'll pay you nothing," as if my child's labor was a joke, as if humiliation was a teaching tool. I didn't feel dramatic. I felt focused. This didn't get to end as a lesson in being exploited. I was still sitting there when I heard soft footsteps on the hallway floor. Molly appeared in the doorway, clutching her phone like it was a fragile object. Her eyes were red. "I can't sleep," she whispered. I patted the chair next to me. She came over, sat down, and unlocked her phone with shaky fingers. "I want to show you," she said. She started scrolling. Message after message. Shift reminders. "Come in at X." "Can you stay late?" "We need you today." It wasn't vague. It wasn't help out if you can. It was scheduling. Then she stopped. "There," she said, pointing. A message that was basically, $14 per hour. We'll pay you at the end of the month. Underneath it, like a trail of breadcrumbs leading to betrayal, were the other messages. Later. Next week. End of the month. We'll talk. Molly swallowed hard. "And then," she said quietly, when I asked again, they laughed. I took a slow breath. 4 weeks of full-time shifts at the rate they promised isn't pocket change. It's roughly 160 hours, roughly $2,240 owed. It was Molly's time, Molly's sweat, Molly's pride. I looked at her. "Is it okay if I use your phone to document everything?" I asked. Molly nodded immediately. "Yes," she said. "I want it to be real. Not them saying I'm lying." That broke my heart a second time. I hugged her, just for a moment, then guided her back toward her room. "Try to sleep," I said. "I'm right here." I waited until Molly finally fell asleep, face turned to the wall, lashes still stuck together from crying. Then I went back to the kitchen, opened my laptop, and pulled up the State Labor Department wage claim portal. Not the police, not a lawyer, not a family meeting. The boring, official place where you tell the truth in boxes and hit submit. Molly's phone was next to me, unlocked with her permission. I didn't need to dig. The proof was lined up like they'd prepared it for court. shift texts, come in at 3, stay late, and that one message with the pay promise. The form asked for the worker's name. I typed Molly and her last name. My hands didn't shake, which felt new. Age, 14. Employer, the restaurant. The address, the number. There was a little describe what happened box. I kept it clean. Worked 4 weeks, pay promised, payment delayed, refused. Then I attached the screenshots, just the clearest ones. Click, upload. Done. No speeches. The last page loaded. Big button. Submit. I didn't make a face. I didn't whisper a prayer. I didn't talk myself out of it. I clicked. A confirmation number popped up with a timestamp. I took a screenshot, closed the laptop, and stood there for a second in the quiet. My mom loves family values. So do I. That's why I chose my kid. I stared at the screenshot for a moment. Then I did something I almost never do. I sent one message to my mom. Short. Controlled. No argument. No threats. Just filed. Documented. Official. Then I went to bed. I didn't sleep much. I slept just enough to be woken by my phone ringing like it had a job. Mom's name lit up the screen. I answered. Her voice had changed overnight. Less smug. More urgent. Tessa, she said, and she sounded like she'd swallowed something sharp. Did you file that claim? Yes, I said. A beat of silence. Then a breath that came out too hard. Why would you do that? She snapped. I could hear her trying to hold it together. She wasn't calling to understand. She was calling to undo. You need to withdraw it, she said. Right now. Molly needs to be paid, I replied. Mom made a small offended sound. Like I'd just suggested something outrageous. Like paying people was a strange new trend. This is family, she said, voice tight. You don't do this to family. I let that sit for half a second. Then family shouldn't do this to Molly, I said. Her tone went warmer, the way it gets when she's about to offer a reasonable solution that benefits her. Let's handle it privately, she said. We'll talk. We'll sort it out. You don't need to involve anyone. You mean I don't need witnesses, I said, and my voice stayed calm. Tessa, she warned. No, I said. Her warmth vanished. Fine, she said, clipped. We'll talk later. I'm not scheduling basic decency, I said. No. The line went quiet. Not peaceful quiet. The kind of quiet that means she's already planning her next move. And she did. The next afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and there they were, Mom and Brielle, standing like they'd come to collect something. Mom had that tight smile she uses when she wants to look like the reasonable one in a story she's about to rewrite. We need to talk, she said, stepping forward like my porch belonged to her. We already did, I replied. You told Molly you'd pay her nothing. Brielle let out a laugh, sharp and delighted. You actually filed. I can't believe you. Mom's eyes flicked past me, like she was checking who might be watching. Lower your voice, she murmured. People don't need to hear this. I smiled once, without humor. Molly heard it. Mom's smile twitched. She went straight to guilt. How could you file against your own family? She demanded. Brielle crossed her arms. Seriously, Tessa, this is embarrassing. Mom lifted her chin. It's a family business. And Molly is family, I said. That's exactly the point, Mom shot back. She was helping. Brielle leaned in, lips curling. And she begged for experience. You're acting like she was in a coal mine. I stared at her. She was promised pay. Mom waved her hand like I'd brought up something childish. Don't be dramatic, Brielle chimed in, breezy and cruel. Also, she wasn't even that good. Mom pounced on that, relieved to have an excuse. Exactly. If we were paying, we wouldn't have— Stop, I said, and it came out quieter than I expected. Not soft, just final. For a second, both of them blinked like they weren't used to being interrupted. Then Mom's face hardened. If you post anything, she said, we'll sue you. Brielle's eyes brightened, like threats were her love language. Say the wrong thing and we'll make your life miserable. I nodded once. Noted. Mom pivoted fast. Threat didn't land, so now it was bargaining. We'll give her something, she said. Not the full amount, but something. Brielle added, impatient. Just take the complaint back, today, and we'll transfer it. It was so practiced it almost sounded like a special offer. I looked at them, my mom and my sister, standing on my porch, trying to negotiate my child's dignity like it was a coupon. No, I said. Mom's smile fell apart. Brielle's laugh died in her throat. No? Mom repeated, like the word didn't belong to her. The complaint stays, I said. The proof stays. The boundary stays. Mom stared at me, and for a second I saw it. Real confusion, like she couldn't understand why her old rules weren't working. Brielle's face tightened. You're really going to ruin us! I held the doorframe, steady. You did this! They stood there another second, as if waiting for me to fold. I didn't. Mom turned first, stiff with rage. Brielle followed, muttering under her breath. And as they walked away, I felt it in my bones. This wasn't over. For some reason, I still woke up thinking the worst part was already behind us. That was my first mistake. I made coffee, checked my phone out of habit, and saw my mom's name sitting at the top of my screen, tagged in a post like we were celebrating someone's birthday. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. The photo was of the restaurant. Bright, polished, were respectable lighting. The caption was long enough to be a sermon. I skimmed the first line and felt heat climb my neck. She didn't mention wages. She didn't mention promises. She didn't mention laughing. She wrote it like this was a heartbreaking family tragedy where she was the victim and I was the villain with a clipboard. Then I saw the sentence that was already being copied into the comments like it was a headline. She demanded over $2,000 from her own family. $2,000. That's how she wrote it. Like Molly had walked in waving a crown and a list of demands. I scrolled. The comments weren't about my mom's choices. They were about my daughter. Entitled, Ungrateful. Kids today. One woman wrote, My father would have taught her a lesson, as if we were voting on how to punish a child for expecting fairness. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Molly stood in the doorway in her socks, hair still messy, phone in her hand. She didn't look angry. She looked scared. Mom, she said, quiet. Did I mess up? I set my phone down like it was something sharp. No, I said. Her eyes flicked between my face and her screen. Grandma says I begged for experience. I breathed in slowly. You didn't beg. Molly swallowed. People are calling me things. I pulled out the chair next to me. Come here. She sat, shoulders tight, like she was bracing for punishment. I leaned in so she couldn't miss my face. You worked, I said. You asked to be paid. That's not wrong. But what if— No, I said again, sharper this time, and immediately softened it. No, they did something wrong, so now they're trying to make you feel wrong for noticing. Molly blinked fast. So, what do we do? I picked up my phone again and opened the post. I didn't write a speech. I didn't write a poem. I didn't write what I wanted to write. I wrote what would survive daylight. A few lines, a timeline, no adjectives, no insults, just facts. I attached 2 screenshots, one scheduling her like staff, one stating the pay. Then the complaint confirmation number, ugly and official. At the end, one line. Molly is 14. I hit post. Then I put my phone face down and stood up to stir the eggs like I was a woman who had not just declared war at breakfast. Molly watched me like she expected lightning to strike. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said. "I'm just annoyed." "Annoyed?" "Yes," I said, flipping an egg with more force than necessary. "I hate paperwork. They made me do paperwork." That got a tiny sound out of her, almost a laugh, almost a breath. By afternoon, the messages started. Not public ones, private ones. The kind that start with, "Hi, I don't want to get involved, but..." Most were relatives. A few were people I barely knew. And then a message came in from a name I didn't recognize. Hannah. "I worked at the restaurant. Can we talk somewhere? Not online?" I stared at it for a long second. My first thought was, today is already full. My second thought was, people don't write like that unless they're nervous. So I replied, "Yes. Where?" We met 2 days later at a cafe across town, midday, ordinary, full of people minding their own business. Hannah arrived like she was late to something important, quick steps, tense shoulders, eyes scanning. She sat down, didn't touch her drink, and started with, "Thank you for meeting me." "Of course," I said. "Are you okay?" She let out a breath. "Not really." She looked at her hands. "I saw your mom's post." I nodded. "And I saw what people were saying about your daughter," she added, jaw tight. "It made me sick." I didn't say anything. I just waited. Hannah glanced up. "I know it's your family." It wasn't a question. It was a warning. "Yes," I said. "Unfortunately." She almost smiled. Almost. Then she leaned forward and dropped it quietly, like she was placing a weight on the table. "The staff are filing a complaint together." I blinked. "Together?" Hannah nodded once. "A group. Current and former." My stomach flipped. She kept going, quick now, like she was afraid she'd lose her nerve. "Hours get shaved. People get told to stay late and then it's not on the check. Tips get weird. Nobody wants to push back because your mom runs that place like it's a kingdom." I felt my mouth go dry. Hannah's voice softened. "And I saw how they treated Molly." I looked up fast. Hannah's voice stayed low, like she still didn't feel safe saying it out loud. "They didn't just not pay her," she said. "They used her. The dirtiest jobs, trash, sticky floors, bathrooms when the line was out the door, and if she looked tired, my sister would laugh and say, 'Welcome to the real world.'" Hannah exhaled. She wasn't allowed to complain. If she asked for a break, they'd act like she was being dramatic. Then Hannah looked straight at me. "Molly's a minor. If you're willing, we want her experience included, with you as her guardian." The cafe suddenly felt too bright. I sat back. "So, you want me to, join?" Hannah nodded. "Yes." I stared at her. "That's a lot." "I know," she said quietly. "But this is bigger than one paycheck." I thought of my mom's face on my porch, thought of Brielle laughing, thought of Molly asking me if she'd ruined the family. I breathed out. "Okay," I said. "I'll do it." Hannah's shoulders dropped like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. "Thank you," she said, and her voice cracked on the last word. A week passed. Life looked normal from the outside. Lunches packed, laundry folded. Molly went to dance class. And then I walked into the studio to pick her up and saw my mother and Brielle standing there. Too close. Too familiar. Already talking. Molly was between them, eyes wide, face pale. I felt something cold slide down my spine. Mom turned first. Her face had that righteous shine it gets when she thinks she's delivering justice. "There you are!" she said, like I'd kept her waiting. Brielle crossed her arms. Do you have any idea what you've done? Molly's gaze snapped to me like she'd been holding her breath until I arrived. Mom spoke directly to Molly, voice sweet in the way that makes your stomach hurt. This didn't have to happen, she said. We're family. Brielle cut in, sharper. You dragged strangers into this. You dragged the whole business into it. Mom's eyes flicked to me, then back to my daughter. You don't do this to family, she said, calm as a verdict. Molly's lower lip trembled. She looked like she was trying to figure out if she should apologize for existing. I stepped forward and put myself between them and my child. Stop, I said. Mom blinked, offended. We're talking. No, I said, taking Molly's hand. You're cornering her. Brielle scoffed. Oh, please. Molly's fingers tightened around mine like she was grabbing onto a railing. I looked at my mom. You don't get access to her, I said. Not like this. Not anymore. And then the anger cracked, just for a second. Mom's voice dropped, and her eyes darted like she was suddenly aware of consequences. You have to take it back, she said. Tessa, you have to. Brielle's face went tight. Mom swallowed, and the next words came out smaller. We put the house up as collateral, she said, for the restaurant. If it falls, we lose everything. The room went still. Molly stared at her like she'd just been handed a guilt she couldn't carry. I squeezed Molly's hand, and I kept my voice calm because that's what my daughter needed. You chose that, I said. She didn't. Mom's face hardened again. So you'll just let us lose everything? I looked at her. You didn't pay people, I said. You didn't pay my child. That's what you chose. Brielle opened her mouth, then shut it, because there's no clean argument against pay people for their work. I turned to Molly. Come on, I said, and we walked out. 6 months later, we were still no contact. Mom, Dad, Brielle, all of them. No calls, no family meetings, no surprise visits. After the dance studio stunt, access to Molly was done. The wage complaint didn't resolve in a day. It moved the way real consequences move. Slow, official, unavoidable. We got notices in the mail, a date to show up, and a hearing where nobody cared about family or work experience. They cared about hours, messages, and whether a kid got paid for work. Mom showed up looking furious and confident. She left looking smaller. A few weeks later, the decision came in writing. They owed Molly her wages. Then finally, the payment hit. Molly stared at the deposit notification like it might vanish. Is that mine? She whispered. Every cent, I said. She didn't cheer. She just exhaled like her body had been holding its breath for months. Then she smiled, small, satisfied, and quietly moved money into her trip fund like it was the most normal thing in the world to be paid for your work. After that, things kept unraveling on their side. In our town, the story spread. People don't like employers who stiff workers, and they really don't like adults who do it to a 14-year-old. Staff complaints stacked. Employees quit. Customers stopped showing up. About a year after all of it started, I heard through relatives that my parents had sold their house. They'd tied it to the restaurant, borrowed against it to keep Brielle's dream alive, and when the business failed, the debt didn't. Molly asked me once, "Did we go too far?" "We told the truth," I said. "They chose the rest." Life got quieter after that. Molly got lighter, and I learned something my younger self never would have believed. Cutting them off didn't break our family. It finally protected it. So tell me, did I go too far or not far enough? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.